All right, so to turn a little bit more to domestic politics here, we had our former president, Donald Trump, in the courtroom yesterday testifying. Now, this is with regards to that civil fraud trial in the state of New York. And to recall the backstory here, this was brought by Letitia James. She's the Attorney General of New York. It all is focused on the valuations of his businesses, the way that he would inflate different asset values in order to secure a certain loan, or in certain circumstances, he would deflate the values in order to get off, from his taxes. Effectively, they've already found that he committed fraud. This part now is just to figure out exactly how big the penalty is. Trump reportedly pretty wild in the stand. This is what the man himself had to say after his testimony.
This is a case that should have never been brought. It's a case that should be dismissed immediately. The fraud was on behalf of the court. The court was the fraudster in this case. I don't have to be here for the most part, but I sort of do have to be here because I want to be here because it's a scam. And this is a case that should have never been brought, and it's a case that now should be dismissed. Everybody saw what happened today. Everybody saw what happened with their star witness who admitted that I never told him what he originally said. I did. He admitted that he lied. And he has absolutely no credibility whatsoever. That's their only witness. And when you look at the numbers, the poll numbers that came out today from the New York Times and CBS, I'm sure the Times was not too happy. But people are sick and tired of what's happening. This is I think it's a very sad day for America.
Sad day for America. It's a scam. Case never should have been brought. All kind of typical things you would expect Trump to say. There were no cameras in the courtroom, so we can just bring you what reporters say happened while the doors were closed. Put this up on the screen from Politico. They say during his 4 hours on the witness stand, the former president lost his temper and attacked the judge. The headline here is also amusing. I'm not a windmill person. Trump takes the witness stand and doesn't break character. In a series of outbursts while testifying, Trump assailed the judge who is overseeing his civil fraud case. There was a lot of back and forth between them. The judge reportedly was beseeching Trump's lawyer to try to get him under control. He wasn't really answering the questions. He was just, berating the judge and doing his typical Trumpian thing. At one point, the judge told Trump's lawyer, Chris Kise, if you can't control him, I will. I will excuse him and draw every negative inference that I can. This is not a political rally. This is a courtroom, he told Trump's lawyer, ordering him to counsel his client to provide answers responsive to the question. So, Saagar, you and I both saw this analysis, which, as best I can tell, is probably accurate. The ship has already sailed in terms of he, committed some level of fraud. There is going to be some penalty, I would say, based on his conduct. It's probably going to be pretty significant. I don't think the judge was too impressed with his presentation here. But also, it feels like this was more of, again, a political response than really a legal response. And I did see some analysis that indicated he undercut some of the defense that his team had prepared, and that his adult children, two of whom, Eric and Donald Jr., are both involved in this as well. They tried to say basically we got advice from accountants. We really weren't involved in this. That was kind of their approach. And he did at points undercut that and admit that he was involved in the crafting of these valuations.
Yeah, so part of the issue is that one of the reasons why they are where they are right now is that their lawyers mishandled the case from the beginning in terms of having it a jury trial or not. So that was why they left it up to the judge itself in order to make the declaration of fraud, which is why you're saying here in terms of the commitment in the eyes of the law around fraud, about the overvaluation of assets. I know everyone was talking previously about the Mar-a-Lago thing, but it actually goes deeper in terms of the mishandling actually on the Trump side of it. So whenever it comes to Trump himself and what he's actually going to be able to do, I think he's taking the correct course, which is if you've already lost in terms of the legal minutia, what you do is you attack Letitia James and you make this political, which it obviously is political. She literally ran on in going after him. So obviously that's going to play into it. She's even in my opinion, look, I think this is too much. She's subtweeting him while the active case is going on. I don't know.
Okay, but it's not like he's conducting himself
with
decorum
on trial.
either.
She's the attorney general. He's not the chief. He's not the chief of law enforcement officer.
Former president, future president.
Okay, sure. I'm just saying he's not the one who's prosecuting her. It's vice versa. So maybe you shouldn't be doing that. But obviously that's how you get votes, and you're just validating that people think it's political, which it obviously is political. I don't actually know. I've been mostly checked out on the merits of this particular one because, while I think it will have an impact on him personally, and will significantly impact some of his decision making in the future. Who knows? I mean, don't forget, I believe he made himself a loan in the last days of the 2016 campaign. He probably won't have to do that again in terms of his own personal wealth. This is far more personal for him and for his family future. Wednesday, Ivanka will take the stand. She'll be the final Trump family member to do so, and then we'll get some sort of determination. But this is not going to have the impact that I think most people think. Like, the big convictions or legal problems for Trump are all going to be around his conduct on January 6th, the federal case, and specifically the Georgia. I still think Georgia is one of the worst ones for him. And then classified documents, obviously, that's open and shut.
Politically, you're right. I don't think that this, no matter how big the penalty is or whatever, it does strike to the core of his whole persona, though, because I mean, this is really like a potential existential threat to his New York business operation. They've already suspended his business licenses. I mean, we're talking about some of his most iconic properties. Trump Tower, right, could be forced into other hands or sold off by the state. I mean, that's the sort of penalties that we're talking about here. What I see as significant about this is two things. Number one, you see the way that his antics, which work very well in the political arena, don't work at all in the legal arena. I mean, this is not going to sway the judge. Quite to the contrary, I think it probably makes it more likely that the judge is going to penalize him even more aggressively than he was likely to before. So the things that he does, where we have this sense of Teflon Don, and he just wriggles himself out of every jam, doesn't work in the courtroom. And related to that, we do always have this joke about the walls are finally closing in. Well, this may be the first time where there really is some actual penalty and consequence for his actions and for the way that he has conducted himself. And I don't think it's going to be insignificant. I mean, in terms of his personal situation and his wealth and what it's going to mean for him and his business, I think it could be quite significant. But to your point, Saagar, the bigger in terms of the political questions, and again, this is a civil case, so keep that in mind, it's different from a criminal case as well. But in terms of the larger political questions, we covered that New York Times poll yesterday that had Trump up on Biden in 5 of 6 swing states. So devastating picture for Joe Biden, for his reelect. There's a lot of panic over that. We're going to get to that in just a moment. However, there is one piece of this that the Biden team might be able to take comfort in. Put this up on the screen. As of right now, only 39% of voters in that New York Times Siena poll actually think that Trump is going to be convicted. But if he is convicted, it really changes the electoral landscape again, at least based on this poll. And people are not always good at predicting what they would do in certain circumstances. So I think that's important to keep in mind. However, if you just are asking Trump versus Biden, Trump is up by 11 in Nevada. If you say, okay, but what if Trump is convicted? It moves to Biden plus 12, okay? From Trump plus 11 to Biden plus 12. In Arizona, it goes from Trump plus 5 to Biden plus 5. In Georgia, it goes from Trump plus 6 to Biden plus 12. In Michigan, Trump plus 5 to Biden plus 12. In Pennsylvania, Trump plus 4 to Biden plus 4. And in Wisconsin, this was the one state Biden had an edge in, Biden plus 2 to Biden plus 14. So this is a huge wild card hanging over this whole thing. And again, we're not talking about the civil case that he's testifying in right now. We're talking about those criminal cases, the documents case, the one with regard to January 6th and stealing the election, also the Georgia case, which is also about fake elector schemes and stealing the election. Those are the ones that we're talking about here in terms of a criminal conviction. And I will say, Saagar, that we did see when we did our Republican focus group, we did see some evidence of that, where even people who were in the room who were maybe not the biggest Trump fans, but they were generally on board with him and, they were good with him and certainly going to vote for him, et cetera. When they were asked, okay, well, what if he's convicted? It was like, oh, I don't think I could do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just don't know. It's one of those where people say a lot of things. Also, what does conviction mean? Which conviction? Are we talking about Georgia? Are we talking about the feds? Are we talking about the classified documents case? Like, we talking about each one of these could be spun, or also, what's the sentence? I mean, if he's sentenced to jail, I feel like that's one thing. If he's sentenced to parole, I think that's another thing. If it's What if it's a mistrial and not even, or a hung jury or a dismissed case? There's so many different scenarios I could go down. But something I have warned about previously is I was like, look, there are a lot of normie people in this country who, if you say he was convicted by a court, they'll be like, wow, okay, he was actually convicted. And they're like, that means he did something wrong. Now, as we all know, the justice system can be very difficult and different sometimes about how that all goes. So most people do not, however, mistrust the justice system enough to say that if someone does get convicted, they think that they probably did something and that could affect their overall vote. I think that's what's in the poll, and it does just show us that Trump will suffer something. We don't know the extent to which.
Yeah.
Doesn't count him out entirely, but also it's not good.
To me, it's more a question of timing.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
Whether or not he would actually be convicted. I mean, listen, he'd have to run the table in all of these cases. I just don't see it. Especially, think about the documents case.
Right.
Like, what even is his defense at this point? They're not even really trying to mount a defense. It's just taking the political tactic, hoping they can hang on, hoping they can exhaust the appeals process too, keep that in mind, before voters actually go to the polls. So I think, Saagar, it's not just this normie sense of like, well, he was convicted, so he definitely did something wrong. I think there's also just a sense of embarrassment. Like,
yeah, I'm sure there
we're going to elect
an
an American president who's like criminally convicted of a variety of crimes. That's just humiliating as a country to do. And I think a lot of people have a revulsion to that. So that's why I am just very reluctant to make any predictions about how this general election is going to go. You've got Biden, who has extraordinarily low approval ratings. You've got, now involved in two increasingly unpopular and brutal wars. You've got, economic concerns that are overriding potentially everything else. You've got the wild card of RFK Jr., who has a lot of money in the bank and who, is a Kennedy and is garnering significant support in these polls. You've got Trump out there and these criminal, possible convictions hanging over his head and the question of the timeline and how that's all going to work out. And then you have the things that we don't even know about that are going to unfold over the course of the coming year. So all I would argue for is a lot of humility in terms of, how this is all going to shake out and what it's going to look like and who's going to have the edge. I could see everything from a Trump blowout to a Biden blowout at this point.
Yeah, I think you're
any
right.
outcome in between. And I think is he convicted? Is he sentenced to prison? Is one of the biggest wild cards that hangs out there to this date.
Absolutely.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.